Joining us now on the Oakland County Megacast is going to be Max Rohtbart. He's a law student at the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law, but you also ran for the county commission seat for District 13. You did lose, but I will say you're very involved in the Republican Party. What did the election teach you?
Well, like most Republicans throughout the night, I actually had a 1,200 vote lead at the end of election night going into early election morning. And then like Republicans, I saw that lead slowly shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink. It was under 1,000, it was a couple hundred, then I was down by a couple hundred, then I was down by a couple thousand. And at the end of the day, it was just clear that I wasn't going to win, so I conceded. So like many Republicans, I saw that red mirage effect. I mean, I knew it was sort of happening. I could tell that only 1/3 of the vote was in based on the history of my district. But, it was kind of interesting. I was the first Republican to actually win on Election Day. So that was kind of an interesting experience for me.
What made you get interested in politics?
Well, I've always been into the process. In 2008, I sort of had a high school project of pick which presidential candidate you liked. I picked Mitt Romney because I was a huge fan of the Olympics at the time. And then slowly I started to get more and more involved in politics. 2010, I ran for precinct delegate, got elected to that. And I've been involved in the Republican Party ever since. I ran in 2016 for county commission, but lost in the primary by about 150-ish votes.
So can you tell us, as someone who has been a delegate, what is that process like and what are you responsible for? Give us a behind the scenes, a peek behind what you do.
Well, as a Republican delegate, you sign a paperwork. It's called an affidavit to run for precinct delegate. You sign it, you get it notarized, you send it into the county. Once they get that form, you're on the ballot. It's one of the lowest ranking positions. It's literally at the very bottom of your August primary ballot. Each precinct has their own delegates, both Republican and Democrat. And the way Michigan election law works is there's some offices that aren't on the primary ballot, like Secretary of State, Attorney General, Michigan Supreme Court. So precinct delegates, they meet in these conventions and they decide the nominees of those offices. And then after the election, they decide on new party offices. We can look at state party chair, county party chair, these Republican leaders. These are people usually selected either by precinct delegates or people elected by precinct delegates.
One of the things with this past election, we had a record number of people come out and vote. As someone who, you're in your 20s, I still believe, right, Max?
Yep, 29.
So, and that's great, but as someone who is a part of that younger generation, and there was such a huge turnout of young voters in this election, what do you want people to know about the whole process? And are you excited to see so many people take part in the democratic process?
Oh my gosh, it was absolutely amazing. You see 150, 160 million people voting. A record for both the winning candidate, Joe Biden, being president-elect and losing Donald Trump. You saw that amazing enthusiasm and turnout on both sides. You just saw that amazing energy. And I really hope, no matter what happens in the aftermath, that these newer voters stay involved in the process and maybe get a little bit of research into some of these down-ballot races to see that maybe, not all Republicans are evil or all Democrats are evil. You can kind of split your ticket and pitch which candidate you wanted.
And kind of piggybacking off of what you just said, it's we had a very contentious election locally on the state side, as well as for the presidential election as well. What has been your take about that whole process of the attack ads, or do you think that our country can come together coming out of this? Because you are a Republican. I believe they're having a big Trump march in D.C. tomorrow with some of his supporters. What's your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I actually am kind of, there's been sort of rumor mills in the Republican Party for years about Democrats cheating, voter fraud, that kind of thing. I'm really happy these sort of allegations can be heard in a court of law rather than on social media. You heard about earlier the benefits of social media for business, your platform, but in terms of politics, it can be very toxic on social media with these rumors going around on how an election is rigged or stolen. So having these complaints heard in a court of law where you can look at both sides equally and have an independent fact finder make a determination of what's real and what's not is actually sort of refreshing. And I kind of like that rather than, sniping from the sides, they're actually, going through the process. And so far, I haven't seen any evidence of voter fraud at all. There's been, a couple things that I've questioned, but that's not enough to throw the election in doubt, at least in Michigan.
And with that, Max, you are a law student right now as well. Has to be an exciting time to be a law student and also watch some of these lawsuits make their way through the court process here in Michigan.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. These election lawsuits, they're coming from all sides. You have some very high quality lawsuits that are coming in, one that went to the Supreme Court, sort of like, this debate. It's a really interesting legal environment, especially with the pandemic going on right now. Obviously, I'm a law student. I can't comment on the law itself, but, I've been involved in elections since 2012. I've been a precinct worker, an election inspector working the polls on election day. So I'm very familiar with the machinations of how an election administration works. And to actually see that process being played out, I was watching the Wayne County Circuit Court, Third Circuit, hear a case about election law and how the Wayne County canvass should be stopped. And over 4,000 people were watching that case, that oral argument live. So it's amazing to see so many people interested in the process of the nitty-gritty of election law.
Max Rohtbart with us on the Oakland County Megacast. He's a law student at the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law, and he also ran for District 13 Commissioner and the Oakland County Board of Commissions in the 2020 election. So, Max, having seen the election process from multiple angles, how confident should the people in Oakland County, in your district, in your precinct, how confident should they be in our local election processes to be done properly and to be done safely, protecting each person's vote from your angle, from what you've seen?
150% confident in the process. The Department of Homeland Security recently released a memo yesterday saying that this was the most secure election in American history. Absolutely, there's amazing checks and balances. Before the election starts, there's testing that occurs of all the equipment, all the tabulators. During the election, you have precinct inspectors of both parties. You have challengers from both parties observing the process. And then after the election, you have this canvassing process, which lasts 20 days, where they literally go over each and every single number and make sure that it's accurate, make sure that it's good. And sometimes you see the vote change a little bit in this canvassing process. That's why, the media hasn't called states like Georgia or North Carolina, because sometimes those shifts in the canvassing process can actually shift who's winning or losing in a race. Like, for example, in Michigan 2016, the media did not declare Michigan for Donald Trump until November the 28th, when the result was certified by the State Board of Canvassers. So Michigan voters can be 150% confident. I know all the clerks in my district, they all do an absolutely amazing job. Bloomfield Township, West Bloomfield, and Farmington Hills, absolutely amazing staff at all levels. They've answered all my questions and definitely gave all the information that they could to the voters.
Do you plan to run for office again?
Well, there's one of my platforms is redistricting reform, and it's going to be a completely different district going into 2022. The Democrats have been running on platforms, anti-gerrymandering. We want fair maps. They passed Proposal 2 in 2018. That was a huge movement to end redistricting in Michigan, or that gerrymandering. But at the county commission level, county commissioners can still redistrict their own districts. And with the Democrats having a one-seat majority still on the county commission, it's going to be interesting to see if the Democrats can actually be democratic in how they draw the maps versus, doing the same gerrymandering and simply ping-ponging back and forth on which party is the most undemocratic of the two.
Max, as we mentioned earlier, this has been such a divisive election. I wonder what it's been like for you as an individual who actually ran for office. Did you run into that as well with just, getting into discussions or debates with individuals that were maybe had different political views than yours?
Well, I've been a moderate in the party for a long time, so I'm very used to standing my own ground, both in the party and outside the party. And me and Marsha Gershenson had very good communication throughout the whole campaign. We talked to each other, we called each other, and made sure that we were, having somewhat of a civil dialogue. I was able to call her to concede after the election. We've texted back and forth. So it really is, a very civil process between us, and that's not exactly rare. In Utah, actually, both gubernatorial candidates, Republican and Democrat, recorded a PSA together telling individuals to come together. My main fight mainly has been educating people on how the election administrative process works. There was a poll that said 70% of Republicans don't trust the process of the election, that it was fair. So what I've been doing is trying to educate as many voters as possible in the aftermath of this election that, yes, there's numerous checks and balances. What they do in Texas or Georgia or any other state is different than what we do in Michigan. Each state runs their own election. So if there's a problem in one state, it's very unlikely to affect the other states.
And Max, what do you think about what happened downtown Detroit at the TCF Center? I know you weren't there, but seeing the challengers on TV trying to get into the center to challenge some of the votes, what did you think about that entire process? Just your take.
I think it was amazing what the city of Detroit did. They made their protest sessional. It was so easy to say, hey, look, all these people are causing trouble. Let's take them all out of the room and just do the count. No, they allowed the election challengers to stay, the ones that were already in the room, one person per precinct for the Republicans, Democrats, and nonpartisan party. There were international election observers actually in Detroit. That came out after from the cooperation organization in Europe. They actually sent observers to observe the TCF count, and they saw no election irregularity. These are international experts who have observed thousands of elections all over the world, and they determined no irregularity. It's kind of interesting. In Detroit, they were counting stop the count, stop the count, stop the count when they were ahead. But in Arizona, where Trump was behind and until yesterday still had a chance to win the state, they were saying count the votes, count the votes, count the votes. So it's very clear there hasn't really been a united message from the Trump campaign determining on how they handle election security and how they want to approach this litigation and other strategy of post-election activities.
So as you said, you're a moderate. What's it been like for you as a member of the Republican Party with some of your beliefs and seeing how divisive this entire campaign has been run?
Divisive politics is nothing new in America. In the election of 1800, John Adams was seen, as a blumbering fool and all this thing. And John Adams' campaign called Thomas Jefferson a bunch of head chopping off revolutionaries. So, there's always been this sort of hostility in American politics. You're seeing this now, especially because there used to be, a single media environment that was controlled only by a few. But with social media now, there are so many different viewpoints. So you're starting to see that, historically partisan come back into American political discussion. We'll just have to see how the parties handle it going into certification and the future Biden administration.
What advice would you give to other people that are maybe considering running for local politics?
Oh, it's surprisingly easy to do. There's over 1,000 Republican slots in Oakland County for precinct delegate, for example, where individuals could, run to fill those spots and represent the Republican Party and the Republican voters in the precinct to, have their own vision of what they want the Republican or Democratic parties to be. There's also, a lot of vacant seats. Birmingham School Board, I believe in 2018, had a seat that was filled by a write-in candidate because there weren't enough people who filed to be on the ballot. Many times it's just simply getting your foot in the door. And, even for me, a losing candidate, I'm still a member of the Oakland County Executive Committee for the Republican Party for the next 2 years. So even if you lose an election, there's still benefits to to competing in the election process and being involved. Most of these offices are uncontested anyway. So there's nothing wrong with putting your name on the ballot and being active in your community.
Yeah, and plus, the education that you're learning by participating has to be invaluable. And I'm wondering, what was it like for you to have to try to campaign and raise donations in the middle of a pandemic when you really couldn't do it the old-fashioned way?
Well, it was really tough. I decided early on that I couldn't campaign door to door because, if I got sick or if a voter got me sick by accident, I started spreading out. The number one concern isn't me winning or losing. It's keeping the members of the community safe. So I've had to do almost a digital campaign. I had to fill out multiple surveys. And really, I just sort of, I did surprisingly well for a Republican in my district. I live in a solid Democratic district. Marsha Gershenson has been an incumbent for the past 12, 16 years around that area. So I really had to virtual campaign. So I couldn't really go door to door. Asking donations was tough. So, it kind of was just a strange campaign. I think you see that in that the county commission didn't really change a lot. The Republicans kept all their seats. The Democrats kept all their seats. And I feel it really was from the difficulty of campaigning.
Max Rohtbart with us. He is a law student at the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law, joining us on the Oakland County Megacast. And Max, in your election race against Marsha Gershenson for the 13th district seat on the Oakland County Board of Commissioners. You talked about the relationship that you and Marcia Gershenson had during the campaign and continue to have. What advice do you have for other political candidates and those holding office to be able to maintain similar kinds of relationships with people across the aisle that maybe they've ran against or maybe that they are even governing with, to be able to have those kinds of civil conversations that benefit ultimately our community by bringing the heads of leaders of different opinions and different backgrounds together to have conversations on issues that affect everybody that is served?
Well, I think you have to learn how to differentiate when your political position is being attacked versus when you are personally being attacked. Like, for example, if you're drawing yourself a contrast between what you are as a candidate versus what your opponent is as a candidate versus, attacking them personally. You see it sometimes in closer elections. You saw it a lot in the senatorial race, all those campaign ads on TV, in the local newscast, constantly, John James did this, John James didn't do that, Gary Peters did this, Gary Peters didn't do that, Trump is great, Trump is evil, Biden is great, Biden is evil. You saw those ads, and that was because, it was very close. But in most of these elections, all you have to do is really reach out to your opponent. You can send them an email, give them a call. And, a lot of times that communication, even if you have maybe an intense policy debate or you attack your opponent based on a position they've taken previously, if you have that communication open, there's that thing after the election where you can come together and try to find substantive policy agreements.
Max, have you had any mentors during this process to help foster your interest in the political process?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. There's tons of people. I mean, for one, Chuck Moss, he recently won Shelley Todd's seat on the county commission. He's been a real help. He was one of my professors in the university, brought one of my favorite books, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. I mean, absolutely legend. There's a ton of other individuals. I was involved in the Rick Snyder campaign 2010. There's so many individuals who were involved in that campaign. And, just being involved, I remember, Mike Bishop, we've talked a lot. And it's just, there's this amazing amount of people. And, I got a conversation with Democrats too. I try to reach out to both sides, not stay constrained in one social media bubble. So I have enormous relationships with many Democrats across the aisle, and I try to keep those relationships intact by sharing areas we agree with, areas we disagree with, and just having, those civil discussions, sometimes in private, to see where we can find areas of agreement.
How do you try to encourage the next generation to step up and get involved?
Well, mainly, I think it's just individuals, there needs to be a more positive message about politics. It's not all bad. It's not all evil. It's really a way where you can get involved in your community. These township boards, for example, they might be Republicans or Democrats, but very rarely do partisan issues like abortion, gun control, some of these really hot button wedge issues become involved. Most of the time they're debating, a new cable TV contract. Sometimes they're debating, how much parks money, library, there's all these different things. Most of these partisan wedge issues you're seeing on the cable news, these aren't discussions that local government is talking about. I mean, if you look at the Oakland County Commission, it's split 10, 11 Democrat, Republican, but you still see this enormous areas of bipartisan cooperation where they agree on the budget, where they agree on most of these resolutions, and maybe there's a couple issues they set aside to disagree on. But the vast majority of decisions are almost universal bipartisan agreement.
So, Max, as we mentioned, you are a law student right now at the Detroit Mercy School of Law. What's it been like for you outside of politics, just trying to balance your studies remotely right now? Are you having any in-person classes at all?
No, we're not having any in-person classes. The University of Detroit Law School, generally law school buildings, they're smaller, some part campus, and it's just really tough to maintain, the social distancing guidelines. And, with generally older members of faculty who are more susceptible to COVID-19, the more serious conditions. So the law school decided very early in June, actually, a couple months, that we are going to transition to all virtual learning until this pandemic becomes safer for us to navigate. And really what it did is it helped the professors transition into a more virtual learning. And, it's still trial and error. We kind of had experiments in the spring, but, the professors and the administration have really come along to help students transition into this all virtual learning. And, hopefully in the summer semester, maybe even later in the spring semester, we can start transitioning more to in-person learning. It's a lot easier to transition from virtual to in-person than it is from in-person to virtual.
Well, Max, we so appreciate your time and having, making time for us here on the Oakland County MegaCast. It's great to talk with you and get your perspective as well. Quickly, when do you graduate law school?
Spring, summer is when I'm going to graduate from law school, 2021, then take the bar and hopefully pass it.
Well, and hopefully by that time, the bar, you will not have to take it virtual. We've heard nightmare stories from individuals that have had to do that this year. So hopefully when you're ready to take the bar, you'll be able to do it in person. But we wish you the best of luck going forward. And again, thank you for your contribution and being a part of the political process. Even if you didn't win, you still came out a winner because of the education that you gained through this process as well. So thank you for your time.
Yep, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your show.